Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Hello, hockey fans. This is the Science of Hockey, and I'm the analyst. In this episode, we delve into the mental health landscape of women's ice hockey, highlighting the pressures of dual careers, the impact of injuries, and the critical role of psychological support. Stay tuned for insights into this vital aspect of the game.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're lacing up our skates and taking a deep dive into the world of professional women's hockey. Specifically, we're going to be talking about mental health. We got a study sent in from BMJ, Open Sport and Exercise Medicine, that focuses on players in Sweden's top league, the SDHL. And get this, it reveals that while a lot of these athletes are thriving, a surprising number are facing mental health challenges, with sleep difficulties being a big one.
It's really interesting, actually, because this study goes beyond just the physical demands of the sport. It really digs deep into the mental well-being of these athletes.
It does, and with a 91% response rate from the players, we're getting a really clear picture of what's going on. One of the first things that jumped out at me was that over 41% of the players reported moderate to severe symptoms of at least one mental health problem, like anxiety or depression.
Yeah, that's a huge number. And what's even more complex is that almost half of those players were dealing with multiple issues at the same time. So it's not just one mental health challenge in isolation. They're facing the combined impact of several. It's like trying to juggle, multiple heavy weights at once.
That's a great way to put it. It makes you realize how important it is to consider their mental well-being as a whole. But before we get too focused on the negative side of things, I do want to point out that it's not all doom and gloom. The study also found that over 60% of the players reported flourishing mental health, meaning they're experiencing high levels of well-being across different areas of their lives. So it's important to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. It really speaks to their resilience.
Yeah.
But there's a nuance here that's really important. The ideal scenario is flourishing mental health without any signs of mental illness. That's actually considered like the gold standard according to the International Society of Sports Psychology.
Yeah.
And in this study, only about 40% of the players fell into that category.
So there's definitely room for improvement, even among those who seem to be doing well. Now, getting back to the challenges for a sec, the study found that almost 30% of players struggled with sleep difficulties. This was actually the most commonly reported issue. I can only imagine the impact that travel late games and the pressure to perform has on their sleep.
Yeah, it's such a critical point. Sleep is like the foundation for both physical and mental recovery. And when your sleep is disrupted, it can create this cascade of negative effects, increasing the risk of things like anxiety and depression. It can even impact how you perform on the ice.
So a lack of sleep can actually make anxiety and depression worse. That's something I hadn't considered before. I knew it could affect your mood, but I didn't realize the connection was so strong.
Oh yeah, the connection is definitely significant. Now, in addition to sleep difficulties, the study also looked at anxiety and depression specifically. And they found that 20.9% of players experienced moderate to severe anxiety, while 18.1% dealt with moderate to severe depression. And these numbers are concerning, especially considering the study was done after COVID-19 restrictions were lifted.
That's a really good point. So we can't just blame the pandemic for these mental health struggles. These issues likely reflect the ongoing pressures of being an elite athlete, regardless of what's happening in the world.
Exactly. This kind of suggests that while the pandemic may have made things worse, these mental health challenges are kind of like deeply ingrained in the culture and demands of high-level sports.
Okay, so we've established that mental health challenges are pretty common among these athletes, but the study also found that a good number of them are flourishing. I'm curious what contributes to this positive side of the mental health picture. Are there specific things that help these athletes thrive?
That's where the study gets really insightful. It pinpoints two key factors that play a huge role: psychological flexibility and perceived social support. These factors seem to really make a difference in how well the players are coping and thriving.
Those sound important. Let's start with psychological flexibility. Can you explain what that is in a way that even someone who's never played hockey can understand?
Sure. Imagine you're on the ice and you make a mistake, like you miss a shot or make a bad pass. Someone with good psychological flexibility can acknowledge that mistake, learn from it, and move on. They don't let it completely derail them. They don't get stuck in a spiral of negative thoughts and emotions.
So it's about being able to adapt to tough situations and not let your thoughts and feelings control you.
Exactly. It's like having mental agility.
Eh.
And this study found that the better the psychological flexibility, the more likely a player was to report flourishing mental health. And the less likely they were to have anxiety, depression, or sleep problems.
That makes a lot of sense. If you can roll with the punches and not let setbacks get to you, you're probably going to be better off mentally. It's like having a built-in stress buffer. Now, what about the other factor, perceived social support? What does that mean exactly in this context?
Well, perceived social support is all about how much support an athlete feels they get from the people around them. Their family, friends, teammates, coaches. Do they feel like they have people, they can count on people who understand what they're going through, people who are there for them? That's what it boils down to.
And I'm guessing based on the other findings that having strong social support is linked to better mental health.
You got it. Just like with psychological flexibility, better perceived social support was strongly linked to flourishing mental health. And interestingly, it was also connected to fewer sleep difficulties. This shows how important it is to feel supported, especially in a high-pressure environment like pro sports. Knowing you have people you can lean on can make a big difference.
It sounds like having a solid support system can act as sort of safety net, helping these athletes deal with the ups and downs of their careers.
Exactly. It really highlights the importance of fostering a culture of support within teams and organizations. Coaches, teammates, family members, they all play a part in creating an environment where athletes feel safe and supported.
Now, before we go any further, I do want to be upfront about some of the limitations of this study. Like a lot of studies, it's just a snapshot in time rather than tracking changes over a longer period. So we can't definitively say that these factors directly cause improvements in mental health. There could be other things at play.
You're absolutely right. It's a cross-sectional study, so we can't prove cause and effect. But the high response rate from the players makes it pretty reliable. And the findings also match up with other research on athlete mental health, which makes a stronger case for focusing on these protective factors.
That makes sense. So what does all this mean for you, the listener? You're interested in the mental health of these women's hockey players, and this study gives us some good info.
The big takeaway here is that mental health challenges are common among these elite female hockey players.
Yeah.
But there are things that can help. Psychological flexibility and social support are super important.
It's like a roadmap to better mental health, highlighting things that can help these athletes thrive both on and off the ice. But I want to take it a step further. We've talked about the individuals, but what about the systems they're in? What role do organizations and coaches play? Can they really make a difference?
For sure. It's not just about athletes taking care of their own mental health. Organizations, coaches, and teammates all play a part in creating a culture that supports well-being.
Because it's not enough to just tell someone to be more resilient if their environment makes their mental health worse.
Exactly. And think about the money pressures these women face. The study said that only 7% of SDHL players can actually play hockey full-time. Most of them are working or studying while training and competing.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that many. That's a lot of extra stress. I can't imagine performing at that level while working or going to school. It must be really hard to prioritize sleep-healthy eating and managing stress.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, there's the pressure to perform, the constant travel, the risk of injury. It's a lot to deal with.
So what can these organizations do to support their athletes? It seems like a lot to consider.
Well, it starts with acknowledging there's a problem. It's super important to create a culture where athletes feel comfortable talking about their mental health. Without worrying about judgment or stigma, we need to move away from that tough-it-out mentality and create a safe space for them to be vulnerable.
Makes sense. You can't expect someone to ask for help if they're afraid of being punished or seen as weak.
Right. And beyond just talking, organizations need to give them actual resources. This could be access to mental health professionals, workshops on stress management and coping skills, or even just having a quiet space where they can relax and decompress.
It's about understanding that mental health is just as important as physical health and giving them the same level of care and support.
Exactly. It's about giving them the tools and knowledge to take care of their own mental well-being.
I like that knowledge is power. The more athletes know about mental health, the better they'll be at recognizing warning signs in themselves and their teammates. And hopefully they'll feel more comfortable asking for help when they need it.
Definitely. And this education shouldn't just be for the athletes. Coaches, trainers, and support staff should also be trained to recognize mental health challenges and know how to help. It's about creating a network of support, a whole team approach.
I love that, a team approach. It really captures what we're talking about. Everyone working together to create an environment where these athletes can succeed on and off the ice.
Yeah, exactly. We need to go beyond just dealing with crises as they come up and be proactive about promoting well-being from the start.
Now, you mentioned teammates earlier. What about their role in this? They spend a lot of time together training, traveling, competing. How can they support each other's mental health?
That's a good question. Teammates are usually each other's first line of support. They're going through the same things, experiencing the highs and lows together. They get the pressures and challenges in a way that other people might not.
So it makes sense that they would play a big part in creating that supportive environment, but what does that actually look like? How can they actively support each other?
For one thing, it's about letting each other know that it's okay to not be okay. That means actively listening to each other, validating each other's feelings, and just offering support without judgment.
So instead of telling a teammate to toughen up when they're struggling, it's about listening to them and letting them know they don't have to pretend to be fine.
Right. It's about saying, I hear you, I see you, and I'm here for you. And it's also about offering practical help, maybe helping them catch up on schoolwork if they're overwhelmed, or just grabbing coffee and listening.
Those small acts of kindness and understanding can really make a difference. It's about being there for each other as people, not just as teammates.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of simply checking in with each other. Just asking, how are you doing, really, can go a long way.
It's about creating a culture of empathy and compassion within the team, where being vulnerable is a good thing.
And that culture should extend beyond the locker room. Teammates can support each other by speaking up against stigma, challenging stereotypes about mental health, and pushing for better resources and support systems.
It's about knowing that mental health is everyone's responsibility, not just something individuals have to deal with on their own.
Yeah, it really does feel like things are changing for the better. We're finally starting to see mental health in sports being taken seriously. But like you said, there's still a lot to do, especially when it comes to creating the right environment for athletes.
Definitely. We've talked about psychological flexibility and social support. But those things don't just magically appear. The team, the organization, even society as a whole play a role.
Okay, so let's dig into that. What are some specific things organizations can do to actually create that supportive environment for their athletes? Well, put yourself in their shoes. They're under a ton of pressure to perform, and they're often juggling school or work on top of that. Organizations need to understand that mental health isn't some separate thing. It's connected to everything in an athlete's life.
It's about seeing the whole person, not just their athletic ability.
Exactly. And that means offering resources and support that address all those challenges they're facing. For example, access to mental health professionals is crucial. Having someone to talk to who really understands the pressures of being an elite athlete can be so valuable.
It's like having a coach, but for your mind. Someone who can help you develop the skills you need to stay mentally strong.
Exactly. And just like physical training, mental training takes practice and guidance. So organizations could offer workshops or seminars on stress management, coping skills, mindfulness, all those things that can help build mental resilience.
And it's not just about offering resources, it's about making sure athletes actually feel comfortable using them.
Right. Think about it. If you're struggling with anxiety or depression, it can be really hard to admit you need help, especially in a high-performance world where there's often a stigma around mental health.
Like they say, it takes strength to be vulnerable. But that strength is hard to find when you feel like you're always supposed to be tough and act like nothing's wrong.
That's so true. Organizations need to create a culture where vulnerability is seen as a positive thing, not a weakness. And that starts at the top with the coaches and leaders setting the example.
So what can coaches do specifically to create that kind of environment?
Well, first of all, they need to learn about mental health themselves. They need to know the signs that an athlete might be struggling and know how to respond in a supportive and helpful way.
It's about being more than just a coach. Sometimes you need to be a mentor, a guide, a friend.
Exactly. And it's about encouraging those open and honest conversations about mental health. Athletes need to feel like they can talk to their coaches without being judged or punished.
It comes down to building trust.
For sure. And coaches can also be role models for healthy behavior. They can talk about their own experiences with stress and mental health, showing that it's okay to not be okay sometimes.
That's a good point. When athletes see their coaches being open about those things, it makes it easier for them to do the same.
Absolutely. And remember, creating a supportive environment isn't just about coaches and organizations.
Yeah.
Teammates are really important too.
Right. We talked about this a bit earlier, but it's worth exploring further. What are some ways teammates can actively support each other's mental health?
Well, it starts with creating a culture of empathy and understanding within the team. That means checking in with each other, really listening to what your teammates are saying, and just being there for them without judgment.
It's about understanding that everyone's going through something, even if you can't see it.
Exactly. And it's about celebrating the good times together, but also being there for each other when things are tough.
It's about being more than just teammates. It's about being like a family.
I love that. And families support each other. They listen. They offer encouragement and help when it's needed.
So how does that translate into action? What are some things teammates can do?
Sometimes it's as simple as asking, "How are you doing really?" and actually listening to the answer. Other times it might mean offering practical help, like covering a training session for a teammate who's feeling overwhelmed or helping them catch up on schoolwork.
Those small acts of kindness and understanding can be so powerful.
Absolutely. And teammates can also challenge those harmful stereotypes about mental health. If you hear someone making a joke or dismissing mental illness, speak up. Let them know it's not okay.
It's about creating a culture where it's safe to talk about mental health, where asking for help is seen as a good thing, not a weakness.
That's the goal. And remember, this goes beyond the locker room. Teammates can support each other by pushing for better resources and policies within their organizations, and by speaking out against stigma in society as a whole.
It's about recognizing that mental health is everyone's responsibility, not just an individual burden.
Exactly. And that's an important message to send, not just in sports, but everywhere. We need to change the way we talk about mental health and make it okay to ask for help, to be vulnerable, and to prioritize well-being.
Well said. You know, this conversation has really made me think about the bigger picture. If these challenges are so common in women's professional hockey, what does that tell us about other sports, especially those that don't have as much funding or support?
That's a really important question. And researchers are starting to look into it more and more. We're seeing more studies on athlete mental health across different sports and levels of competition. And it seems like these challenges are everywhere, not just in one sport.
That's both concerning and motivating. It shows that we need big changes, not just quick fixes. We need to stop just reacting to mental health crises and start actively promoting well-being from the ground up.
I totally agree. It's about shifting the culture from one that prioritizes winning at all costs to one that values the overall well-being of athletes.
And that means investing in resources, providing education, and creating an environment where athletes feel like they can actually prioritize their mental health without negative consequences.
Yes. And it means challenging those old school beliefs that say mental toughness is about hiding your emotions and never showing weakness. True mental toughness is about acknowledging your feelings, understanding them, and having healthy ways to cope with them.
It's about understanding that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness, and that being vulnerable can actually help you grow and become more resilient.
Exactly. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, but I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought. If psychological flexibility is so important for mental well-being and success in sports, how can we help young athletes develop this skill from the very beginning? What kind of training, coaching, and support can we give them to build that mental strength and resilience so they can thrive on and off the field?
That's a great question, and I hope it encourages more research and innovation in the field of athlete development. If we can give young athletes the tools they need to deal with the challenges of sports and life, we're not just helping them succeed in their sport, we're helping them live healthier, happier, and more fulfilling lives.
Absolutely. It's about supporting the whole person, not just the athlete.
Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.